Redditors that host their home on Airbnb, what has been your worst experience with a guest? I used to travel a lot for work and I would put my apartment up on Airbnb while I was away. My apartment has a bunch of closets and drawers which I used to leave empty and at my guest's disposal. However, there is one closet in the bedroom which I kept locked cause it is where I keep my personal belongings. One time a guest left a bad review saying that the place had no storage space, which I was very confused about until I got home and saw my closet. Dude had tried to open it using brute force. The door was almost pulled off its hinges and the wood was chipped in some places. The door in question had 2 padlocks, and the perfectly usable closet on the opposite wall was untouched. Sounds like a creep. Rented out to a group of 4 girls. Turns out they were going partying every day during their stay. I get called one day at 5 AM. It's the guard from my building telling me there's a passed out girl in the lobby's couch, puking and pee herself. None of her friends had gone back to help her. Ruined the couch obviously. The next day they send me a message again. Another one of the girls had sprinted to the building stairs and also pee herself. A friend of mine rented to a girl who was convinced that there were cameras hidden all around the unit. She dismantled the lighting fixtures, picture frames, medicine cabinets, remote controls, etc. This occurred in 2015. They were live-in hosts renting out the main part of their home. She also depotted plants, removed smoke detectors, hid all of the refrigerator magnets, and destroyed her cell phone. They were compensated by Airbnb. Thank you, Reddit, for an excuse to reach out to an old friend. We are live-in hosts, so we are present while guests stay in our spare room. A guest arrived and immediately announced that they had crap himself during their journey. They then marked us down for cleanliness. Mate, you crap yourself. Also a guest who found a pair of my flip-flops in a wardrobe that they should not have opened, then crap over the bathroom floor, ruining my favorite flip-flops in the process. Also, a guest who went out drinking for 10 hours before checking in, meaning I had to collect them from the taxi, put them in bed in the recovery position, check on them when I woke up for work, then call the taxi company on their behalf when it turned out they'd lost their phone. I worked in a call center that handled some of Airbnb's customer service. So, one guest murdered 2 people in the host's home and got arrested there. Another guest was from a culture that eats iguanas and barbecued up a 7-year-old girl's pet iguana to serve to the family as thanks for hosting him. Another guest filled a mug with human crap and left it in the host's microwave. You really lose all faith in humanity working in customer service call centers. Airbnb requires photo evidence for all host complaints. And guess who is the first to see them? The initial customer service agent, who may only be on their first or second day taking calls. And the iguana man was forced to pay for both a new barbecue for the family and a replacement iguana. I used to own several hostels in Mexico. During the low season we would create pages for our private rooms. American art student moves in. Nobody ever sees her. She often appears around 1 AM to eat noodles and watch SpongeBob with night porter. Fast forward 5 months and she decides to live at the hostel. The city is doing really bad visitor numbers due to the cartel cutting a bunch of heads off and leaving them in the city center freeway. So I get a call one day. The manager of the hostel explains the guest won't move room. We were redecorating and had mentioned previously we would be asking to temporarily move room. No objections from her. Happy vibes. This turns into a 2-day thing. Manager calls me. She explains the guest won't move to another room. I explain the decorators need to work around it till she moves room. Day 4 the manager asks her to leave room. She declines and then the manager explains we would have to call police. Police arrive. Cop was an awful man and complained the room smelled of crack. As they forced the door open the furniture she stacked up against the door fell down. We could hear it crashing down in the room. They call in the fire department who cut the bars in on the window. She had been pregnant all along and was receiving drugs from her boyfriend daily. He would deliver them to her window. In the room she had given birth to a baby and then pushed the baby under the bed. She also had 4 fans on the floor on full power which dried up all the blood on the floor and the birth. A side drawer that had been stacked on top of the furniture against the door had fallen directly on her head, pulling part of her face off. She survived with an awful scar on the side of her face, but she was completely destroyed by drug use. not a host, but I stayed at an Airbnb that rented 2 rooms. I was in bed and hear the other guest, a man and women, return. They're loud and drunk, but nothing crazy. About 10 minutes later I hear what I thought was them fricking, but then quickly realize it's someone getting hit. The host and I both hear this. The host starts knocking on the door, asking what's going on and to open the door. The woman opens the door and her lip is split wide open. She's bleeding all down her shirt. The guy is in the room, but runs out with a backpack and leaves. He's taken both of their cell phones and wallets. The police show up and everyone gives statements. They found him walking down the road and he found different accommodations at the police station. I slept fine. The room was Harry Potter themed, so I still left 5 stars. One dude stole my trimmer. This other guy took the cake though. When I took him the second key to the apartment that his mother needed, he opened the door slightly ajar and only extended his hand, palm facing up, to receive the key. Didn't want to shake my hand. Sent me messages complaining to me that drawers in the bathroom were full of personal stuff. One was full of items that we purposefully leave for guests to use, including new pads, soaps, toothbrushes. He was annoyed by this and said, I'll just move this to one of the bedside tables in the master bedroom, shall I? Which is also full anyway. There, we leave blocks and pens for guests to use, as well as reading material like The Economist or guides to the city. This also annoyed him. He also complained about food that we leave for guests to partake of and be welcomed by. Upon leaving, guy leaves a massive, scathing review including hot takes like the linens and pots being worn out and needing replacement. They're not and they don't. They're also top of the line. Says the apartment was dirty upon entering. It wasn't. It was thoroughly cleaned before his arrival, as it is before every guest's arrival. He concludes by complaining the taxi ripped him off. I'm guessing the insinuation is that I was in cahoots with the taxi company? I don't know. His mother was nice though. I often wonder how parents who give birth to fricking idiots feel about said fricking idiots. A guy I work with told this story how he hired a maid through a referral from his friend. She was great apparently and asked to stay there a couple times when he was gone. After he agreed to let her stay a few weeks when it wasn't being rented however, she ghosted him. He ended up calling the cops and they checked up on her. She was there and although nervous, everything seemed normal. She later got a hold of him and asked to stay longer. He said no, clean it and get out. He comes back randomly to his house at 5 AM a few days later to someone sleeping in his downstairs room with dirty dishes and cigarette butts everywhere. Ends up it's this maid's H-addicted husband. He had been using it as a flop house and drug den. This guy escorted the husband out by gunpoint pantsless. The place was trashed downstairs, but apparently perfectly clean still upstairs. His TV was stolen but the husband brought it back and left it in the driveway so he didn't get charged with theft. Apparently there was little he could do about the free stay the husband took advantage of. Reminds me of the plot of the movie Parasite, minus the H and stolen TV. My wife and I were hosts for about a year to make ends meet. We had just moved to a new town so she could attend grad school. Guests had full access to the second floor while we lived on the first. Met a lot of cool people and ended up getting super host status. Last guests we ever had were an older couple that had traveled a lot. They seemed fine and we had a nice conversation and they seemed fine with the accommodations. Keep in mind up until this point we had never gotten less than 5 stars from dozens of guests. Later that night I was at my job, bartending. Busy evening and homeboy rolls up saying he needs to talk with me outside. I hurry out trying to accommodate him and also get back to my busy shift. He proceeds to lay into me at my place of work about how our space wasn't up to Airbnb standards and they won't be staying there and some friends found them another place to stay that night. I was confused but okay sure bud, I'll give you the full refund you're asking for. He goes on his way. We refund everything we had gotten from them. Airbnb did not refund the taxes and fees per their own terms and conditions. I think his main complaint ended up being a spider web under the bed and that there wasn't AC upstairs. Mountain town on the east coast of US in the summer. It was warm but there were fans and it wasn't unbearable. I can understand why he'd want to stay somewhere else though. Anyways, we think it's all behind us and my wife and I embark on a cross-country road trip a few days later to check out the country and go see her family on the west coast. First day the guy starts blowing us up through Airbnb messaging saying he didn't get all his money back and to send him the rest. We had returned all the money we got. We told him to take up the rest with Airbnb and that we couldn't help him. He was flipping out saying we were bad at business and there were other avenues to get him his money back like Venmo and some other crazy stuff, to the point we had to contact Airbnb to take care of it so he would stop contacting us. He basically wanted us to pay him for taking away our opportunity to make some money off other guests that weekend and for him to insult us and our home. It was a crazy stressful situation at the beginning of a long trip and influenced us to find a roommate instead of continuing with Airbnb hosting. We also had a dude and his girlfriend who were probably in their late 40s get absolutely hammered. Come back around midnight and she was throwing up in the yard while he laid on our living room floor with our dog talking junk about his girlfriend and asking us for weed. They were alright but left about 40 empty cans up in the room for me to clean up. My friend's Airbnb guest taught their kitten to meow once, and then the quietest sweet needy cat turned loud and needy. 'Twas a curse that kept on giving long after he left. Too bad he didn't teach the cat to speak English. Missed opportunity. My partner looks after an Airbnb for his friend, self-catering only. The house is an 1800s big country house. It is used primarily for large get-togethers and parties. Most guests are great and clean up well to get their deposit back. A group stayed and left the place pretty messy, but we couldn't figure out what the smell was. Turns out they left a full pig in a rubbish bag under the kitchen table. They tried to cook a pig on a spit and basically left its mainly raw corpse under the table. Every toilet was destroyed too. Must have eaten the semi-charred meat on the outside of the pig when drinking without realizing that it was freaking raw. Sorry Gordon Ramsay. Always find it amusing when people figure out that pigs on a spit aren't exactly really easy to do. They take a very long time to cook through and constantly tending to the fire or gas for like most of a day. I've seen a couple birthdays with a whole pig that didn't turn out properly at all. You can't just throw it under a roaring fire for 2 hours and think it's gonna work while you get drunk as 10 men. My mum did this. She had some people from out of country come stay. They moved the furniture around, swapped and most mattresses, left a massive pile of dishes in the kitchen. The bathroom was all buggered, and they must have been cooking and smashing clams or oysters shell in and around the BBQ outside. I went over to help my mum out a little after work for a bit, but it was a 2-day minimum cleanup job she had to do. Mum even had to bring in a cleaner lady to help as well. Needless to say, the people who stayed didn't get their deposit back and got a file reported on them. Belp should be a word. I don't know for what, but it should be. Not my story but a friend of mine's. He has an apartment in London, an urban area with dense houses and population. The apartment he hosted has this window facing Main Street, which people tend to assume it's non-see-through, but it's not. So the guy who stayed in it decided to sit in front of that naked and had a few beers, overlooking the great view. He must have fallen asleep or something and everyone passing by the road just had to see this poor creature. The area I refer to is in the context of where the apartment is and not the whole of London in general. In that sense, the population per square km here would be extremely high. He sat on a couch, right in front of the see-through window to have his beers, just like anyone would do. The window used to be non-see-through until it had sustained some damage from a nearby construction site, forcing them to repair immediately without thorough checking. This is where the whole new feature of see-through was born. Lastly, this incident at the time was overshadowed by another weird event in London called the Naked Bike Day. You can look up what this is. Please only above 18. I am still under the impression that he may have come to London to take part in this event and perhaps assumed people of London are more tolerable towards nudity. Thanks. I kinda like that guy's style though. I hosted for a few years as a super host, and frankly I had lovely guests, very cool, intelligent, well-traveled, interesting people from all over the world. They were all pretty tidy too and considerate. The only annoying thing was people who talked way too much. Normally, people would exchange pleasantries and we'd chit-chat for a bit, which is totally fine and welcome, but every once in a while, I'd get a guest who talked non-stop from the time they got in until they went to bed. The rental suite was fantastic, like its own separate apartment. fully stocked with everything I would want if I were a guest. And yet, there were a few people who had to hang out on my floor and talk. When I got an overtalker, sometimes I would hide when I heard them coming, so they'd go ahead to their floor. BC, I just could not stand someone talking at me from 7 PM until 11 PM. Not a host, was a guest. We stayed in a carriage house that was split into 2 apartments in Savannah. The host was the most wonderful southern personality I've ever encountered. Around 3 AM I woke up to a loud banging noise, like someone trying to break down a door. It got loud and louder, and eventually sounded violent. This went on for 20 minutes before my GF got out of bed and politely asked the neighboring guests to be quiet. They remained quiet for another 20 minutes and then they were at it again, this time much louder. Drunkenly they locked themselves out and decided that breaking the door down was their only option. The next morning when we left, the deadbolt was knocked out, the entire door frame was stripped off and the door was smashed to bits. We felt so bad for the host. It was going into a holiday and she had to cancel the next guest stay because of the damage. Stupid drunk college kids. I'm embarrassed to say that I was not the host in this story. Me and my mate went out on a pub crawl in Prague during our gap year. I don't enjoy clubbing and the last venue on the crawl was a club, so I cut slightly earlier than my mate. Around 1 AM I got back into our apartment and went to bed. I was woken up by my friend at 4 AM and the entire kitchen was flooded. Not even exaggerating, there was like a freaking inch of water lining the floor, spewing rapidly out of a broken overhead pipe. I asked him WTF happened and he claimed he had woken up standing in it. Being unfamiliar with the house, I didn't know where the choke point in the pipe was to cut it off. We called the guy who owned the place, which was painstakingly slow given the time. We managed to get through to a family member who then contacted him. He arrived about 15 minutes later, in which time the water issue has become even worse. We had sealed off the room using a heap of towels to minimize the water leaving the kitchen, as it had tile floors while the rest of the house was hardwood. But this made it accumulate to about ankle height. The kitchen also had a sunken floor. Up until about 6 or 7 we were using pots to clear the indoor swimming pool from what used to be the kitchen. I didn't look like it had done a horrendous amount of damage once we were finished, but I imagine the water seeped through the floor and into the walls, causing all sorts of damage. What makes it worse is that it was a 3rd floor apartment. My friend, being the one who originally found it, told the Airbnb property owner that it was like that when he woke up, but later told me that although he can't remember it, he thinks what must have happened is he'd wandered in from the club blackout, drunk, and tried to do a pull up on the pipe. That said, though, he wasn't wet when he woke me, so who knows what happened. I felt really bad for the host. I wasn't directly renting my place, but I was a translator for a dude who rented like 30 apps in Mexico City. The everyday problem came from Americans who looked to get free nights and discounts for the most ridiculous reasons. We had a Chinese grandma burn down the apartment because she left the dryer on for hours while she took her dog for a walk. But by far the most disgusting experience came from a Chinese guy in his early 20s. He rented the apartment for 3 nights. A few hours later, after his check-in, he sent a photo of a bed, completely covered in cash. No context and no message. Then he sent a photo of him getting a black Mercedes-Benz SUV out of the Polanco concessionary, squatting next to it with him dangling the keys. The next photo is him squatting in the hood of the SUV. He left without returning the keys to the doorman, so a locksmith had to tear down the door. The place was a mess. Food rotting in the little lounge. The bin was completely empty and the floor and furniture had trash all over them. Snacks, bottles, plastic bags, etc. Then the room. Again, it was all littered up. Condoms and plastic bags lying on the floor. The bed had a huge stain of crap. Then the bedsheet was rolled up, and inside there was a trunk of crap. The towels had skid marks of his butt and the toilet paper was left untouched. And he made all of this by himself in 3 days. He happily paid all the extra charges, and later that year he rented the place again. That last time he even did his bed and left a basket with gifts. So I guess he had at best some conscience left in his brains. LOL, he couldn't find anyone to flex on but you. These ladies got locked out because all 3 didn't bring any of the spare keys. I had to leave a beating since they demanded I let them inside. Since I left them all spares and my original, Had to climb up 2 stories by building a makeshift Move from Home Alone style stack of boxes and break in my own apartment to open the door from the inside for them. They gave me my only negative rating out of about 20. Not my cabin, but in Tahoe they did something with Airbnbs where people could offer them to people affected by the Paradise Fire. My friend's family, out of the kindness of their heart, opened their cabin, and someone who apparently hadn't even been affected by the fire used a fake name, and they stripped the cabin of anything that could be seen as valuable. His grandpa's ice axe, snowshoes, all kinds of other old stuff like that. They even took all the pots, pans, silverware, plates, everything. People who take advantage like that are the worst. I hope they get what's coming to them. Worth mentioning, I have 2 friends who own a few in a mountain town in SoCal. They say the cleanest and most respectful people are when they rent it to pee companies. LOL. They say families will legitimately trash the place, yet the pee companies always clean up. Remember kids, even when you're just renting out your home, the pee industry is your best friend. I know a girl that did it, and guests broke a globe and glued it back together with all the wrong countries joined together. They also spilled a pint of water on the rug and just left it, which made a big circle watermark on the wooden floor. She was a bit fussy about hygiene, so I was surprised that she didn't mind loads of strangers doing all sorts in her bed. It is baffling. Clearly the lure of money is great for some people. I mean, I personally just sort of assume that any adult with a romantic partner has a non-zero probability of having had fruct on any horizontal or inclined surface in their home. The fact I'm willing to visit and sit down in their homes indicates I'd probably be okay with Airbnb guests. I used Airbnb to rent out a military camper truck I built. I only had 1 guest and 1 horrible experience. I will never be a host again. The first guest was on BNB for a couple years and had a few reviews from hosts that were good. Anyways, the guest forced open my RV gate, parked his vehicle in my backyard, and then 3 more guests, only 1 guest was booked, and a dog. I had a no pet policy. Proceed into my motorhome. The next day comes and it's time for them to leave, but they won't leave. I had to sit outside the door and wait for them to get ready. They begged to stay, but I had a very strong feeling something was wrong. Inside, I found very short straws with burnt ends and burned aluminum foil around the camper. I figured out that they were probably freebasing H. They also managed to completely fill up the grey water tank and black water tank. Later, I found out that the rental car was most likely stolen and they were hiding it from the police. Airbnb was pathetic in the lack of customer support during the experience and after. Good thing you followed your gut, though. No telling what damage they could have done. I imagine, at the least, they'd not have told you they filled your tanks and just kept using it, assuming it was hooked to a hose so they had water on demand. I clean for 1. Saw some guests pull in. 7 people get out. Several things wrong with that. The car could only seat 5. When they booked, they said there were only going to be 2 guests staying there. They complained the whole time they were there about how things didn't work. Wasn't true. Thankfully I never cleaned up after the 7 people. The place also only had 3 bedrooms. That's illegal too. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.